Welcome to Film Strip. These podcasts are spoiler-filled as we discuss the plots, characters, and themes of the films in review. All content used or discussed in these podcast episodes is the property of the respective owners and used under the Fair Use Act, Section 504(c)(2), Title 17.
Welcome to Film Strip. I'm Ron.
I'm Lindsey.
I'm Jay.
And we are here to talk about The Return of the Living Dead, starring James Karen, Tom Matthews, spelled like our friend Tom Crow, Clu Gulager, Don Calfa, Linnea Quigley, Beverly Randolph, Miguel A. Nunez Jr. in what is the peak of Miguel A. Nunez Jr.'s run. John Philbin, Mark Venturini, and Jonathan Terry, written by Rudy Ricci, John Russo, Russell Strainer, and Dan O'Bannon, directed by Dan. I'm involved with Alien, and I also made this movie, O'Bannon. Released in 1985 on a $4 million budget, it grossed over $14 million at the box office and spawned a franchise with 5 entries of varying quality. All right, what are your backgrounds with this movie, this series? Have you seen any of the other movies, the zombie genre in general, Lindsey?
I just watched this one today for the first time ever.
Nice. Another first time watch for Lindsey. I really have a good time when we're able to do that to you and make you
I feel like a lot of these are first time watches. I have seen the original Living Dead movie, like circa 1960 something.
Yeah, Night of the Living Dead. Yeah.
Yeah. And I've seen several other zombie movies, but no, this was my first experience with this one. So
which zombie movies, Lindsey?
The one that we like with the mall and the zombie baby.
Oh, Dawn of the Dead.
Yes.
The Dawn of the Dead remake, yes.
Dawn of the Dead. Seen that one. And I don't know. That's what I'm going to stop with now. There's a bunch. The names don't come to mind.
Understandable. We're recording this later than usual because of me. Jay, what about you? What's your background with this flick and zombies?
I saw this one on a cable or a rental, probably a rental in the later 80s, mostly because the box art is amazing. And it's back when box art was a thing, and poster art was still a thing. And I was aware of Night of the Living Dead and all that. I didn't see most of the Romero stuff until late high school, college, all that kind of thing. But I saw this when I was younger, and I mean, it kind of hit the sweet spots because it had the dad from Nightmare on Elm Street 2, and it had one of the Tommy Jarvises from the Friday the 13th that I liked, and all these other people that I had seen and stuff. And it had the guy from Friday the 13th 5 that sings in the toilet before he gets killed by Jason. So I knew people in it, and I had a pretty good memory of it. I've never seen any of the sequels to this though, wildly enough. I've never sought them out. I just thought when you end with the way this movie ends, I feel like you said all you want to say, and we'll talk about that when we get there. But as far as zombie movies go, though, I'm kind of like Lindsey. I've seen here and there. I've seen the Romero ones. Like I said, I saw the Dawn of the Dead remake on either our second or third date with my now wife. We both went and saw that together and had a real blast with it. And I've seen a lot of those kind of things, but unlike werewolves, which are a big, hole in my horror watching and stuff, I've seen a lot of zombie flicks through the years, and I always felt like there's definitely a difference between this series and the Night of the Living Dead series or the Dead series, I guess they call it, that Romero did, because his are not that these aren't, but his are much more kind of sort of serious and political and social commentary and stuff. And these are a lot more fun about it, And so, and there was something just kind of punk rock about these, and particularly this movie, that always stuck in my head. And it's just a big party, and so fun to revisit and think about it. But Ron, I know this is a big one for you because you've been talking about doing this one since you came on the show all these years ago.
Oh yeah, this is probably a late night cable discovery for me. I know it was on Monster Vision at least once, and I watched it then in the cleaned up for TV version, which is kind of sad because they cut out some of the great head bites and stuff. But yeah, like when this came out on DVD with like the unabridged, with most of the soundtrack, with the soundtrack restored in like 2002 or whenever that was, I went out and bought it immediately. I have a T-shirt, a Return of the Living Dead T-shirt somewhere in the house, probably in the bottom of the laundry pile. I'm a big fan of this movie, not just because of what it just not just because of its entertainment value, but because of what it means to those of us who lived through the Louisville nuclear disaster of 1984.
I was going to ask you, how's town? So as we'll get to it. It took me for years to realize where Alien versus Predator Requiem ripped that off from, and now I remember. I was like, oh yeah, I knew that was an original idea.
Well, I'm sure Dan O'Bannon got a check for just the concept of Alien versus Predator. So.
Oh yeah, his estate definitely did for sure. I don't know if he was still with us by then, but yeah. So I I just remember so much about this movie and like the impetus behind it and stuff like that. And that's what I wanted to ask you because I knew that like John Russo had co-written Night of the Living Dead with George Romero, and I don't know if we'll ever review that one or not, but it's hilarious that that movie's only in the public domain because they screwed up and didn't put the copyright tag on the credits, and that's why it's just out there for the world. But they split over that.
Because somebody decided to change the title from Night of Anubis to Night of the Living Dead. I believe the distributor did that.
Oh, okay.
When they cut the Night of Anubis title card, they cut the copyright out of the movie.
I mean, because of a typo, that movie is now all of ours.
Yeah, just from one forgotten thing that movie has been free to the world, but a lot of the stress between Russo and Romero comes down to wanting to do sequels, how to monetize the sequels, stuff like that. So as a result of the many court cases between them, Romero got the rights to call his movies blank of the Dead, and John Russo got the rights to blank of the Living Dead, which is why you've got Night of the Living Dead, Dawn of the Dead, Day of the Dead, Twilight of the Dead, et cetera, et cetera.
And then all of these are
Return of the Living Dead, Return of the Living Dead 2, Return of the Living Dead 3, which is an underrated Brian Usna zombie movie.
Okay.
It's got a real interesting sensibility. If the thought of Brian Usna doing a zombie movie isn't enough for you,
I was gonna say that intrigues me already, but yeah.
The main zombie in it, punk rockifies herself with some extreme body modifications, taking advantage of her zombiness to just do it with like broken glass and stuff rather than like actual piercings.
I wouldn't, I don't expect anything different from the guy that brought us Reanimator, among other things, in Society, and
Yeah, no, that tracks. But yeah, that's why these movies are Living Dead and why Romero's are the Dead. And
yeah,
now that they're pretty much everyone involved in both sides of this lawsuit is gone, the twain shall never meet. But it's an interesting fork in the historical road, I think.
Yeah. I didn't realize it. I think I had heard it somewhere along the way or whatever, but I was just doing a little bit of background for this review, and John Russo wrote a book called Return of the Living Dead that is sort of loosely the version they go with for this. And this is all Dan O'Bannon and these other people writing it. But were either of you aware of the book? Have you encountered it before? Heard of it?
No.
I was aware of the book, but I haven't read it. But you're not the first person to tell me that I should read it.
I would recommend it. It's a different thing. There's some same characters, but it's a very different sensibility. But it's like, it's dark. It leaves you, and it's a pretty quick read or listen if you want to do audiobook. It leaves you in like a, oh, they went there kind of space. Like it's pretty good for what it is. I mean, it's just pulp horror, but I was impressed with it. I had never encountered it before, but decided to give it a spin, before after watching the movie before we reviewed this tonight, and I was like, okay, I'm impressed with this. It's actually pretty good, so I would recommend that for sure.
You said it was kind of a quick read too, right?
It is. I mean, it was a quick go through. I think the audiobook's only like 4 hours if you listen to that version, but I mean, you can blow through it in a day. I mean, it's nothing. So it's a really quick go, and it's sort of told. I mean, it's almost told like you're reading like a very long news magazine article about this horrific event that happened, and you're never clued in as to like the why of the way things are. You just have to go with it, which sort of makes it fun. They just drop you in the middle of like this world where zombies are happening, and we're not going to tell you why. You just got to live with it, and it's pretty wild. But growing up where I did in the South and stuff, there was a lot of it that sort of spoke to the time that really was more like my dad's time and stuff. But I saw those towns, I know those places, there were people in it. I'm like, I know people exactly like this. And I mean, the opening scene is they go to a funeral, and the parents have to stake the daughter's head in the casket to make sure she doesn't come back as a zombie. Like that's the opening like 10 pages. So it sets you on a mood like immediately, and with everything that's going on.
So, fun fact, they are actually doing a reboot of the franchise, expected to come out in Christmas 2025. They're the first that's the first film of the reboot, set 18 months after the events of the original film. And the other rights holder of the franchise has announced that they are going to do a separate sequel starring Linnea Quigley as Trash.
Oh,
They're going to bring
wow.
Trash back
What?
as
That
part of it's called Trash's Revenge. Yeah.
that feels like a sci-fi original waiting to happen right there, man. That
Well, the sci-fi originals were the fourth and fifth movie in the
yeah.
series.
I'm aware of Rave to the Grave. I've never seen it, but I am aware that it exists.
I have seen both Necropolis and Rave to the Grave. The thing that I remember about Rave to the Grave is at the very end of the movie, you see the tar man hitchhiking down the street, down the road, trying to get to the rave. And when someone pulls over, he scares her away by yelling brains. She takes off, and then he has no choice but to yell after her brains as he walks away, like
Yeah.
Incredible Hulk style.
I mean, I think that's one of the things about this movie that I didn't realize until revisiting this time was so much of what we like know in modern times of zombies, and really what kind of influenced a lot of the zombie renaissance that came after the Day of the Dead remake and stuff like that is actually from this movie and not from the George Romero movies. Like this, like the whole brains conceit and a lot of the fast moving stuff and some of the other I want to say a lot of the more tongue-in-cheek comedy kind of stuff all comes from this, and I didn't realize it was that influential.
Well, I will say, Jay, being I guess the zombie expert on the podcast, that there were fast zombies before Return of the Living Dead. Because Nightmare City is full of fast zombies, and they also use weapons and are able to do some rudimentary speech and stuff. But this, just the tar man saying brains is the thing that pop culture has latched on.
Yeah.
And,
well, it's like, there were other bands that did power ballads before Bon Jovi and Def Leppard cornered the damn market on it. But then, they're the ones that everybody remembers. So, and are still playing at wedding receptions today. I can attest to this.
Yeah. And speaking of, there's a great song by a band called The Creep Show. They're like a psychobilly band, and they have a song called Zombies Ate Her Brains. And it's a fun song, very fun song. They're Canadian. Don't hold that against them.
We're going to talk about the soundtrack for this movie because I found something new for a run playlist, Lindsay. We'll talk about it. It's a dark song, but it's got a great kick. So,
oh, Jay, I cannot wait to get around to what you're going to talk about there because I love this movie soundtrack to an unreasonable degree. I mean,
yeah,
you give me that many Cramp songs, a TSOL song. I'm very happy middle-aged punk rocker type.
Well, why don't you in your middle-aged punk rock ways give us a plot summary for this for maybe the uninitiated or people that haven't visited the Return of the Living Dead, Ron?
Ladies and gentlemen, we are gathered here today to mark the 31st anniversary of the Louisville nuclear disaster. Thanks to our friends at the Louisville Chamber of Commerce, we're dedicating this new plaque to the first responders who valiantly attempted to warn us of the dangers of trioxin 245. Trash, Suicide, Scuzz, Spider, Casey, Chuck, Tina, Freddie Hanscom, Frank Johnson, Bert Wilson, and Ernie Kaltenbrunner. 4 beloved members of the local punk rock community, 4 members of the local breakfast club, a beloved local business owner, and a beloved local mortician and upstanding member of the local Nazi party. Today we gather to remember the Trioxin 11. It was Freddie's first day at Unita Medical Supply, and Frank was showing him the ropes when they came across some discarded U.S. Army Corps of Engineer drums, the likes of which caused the original Night of the Living Dead. Turns out that wasn't a movie. That was a real thing. But the military threatened George Romero to make it look like a fake thing.
It's like the Kubrick moon landing?
Yes, basically, it's the Kubrick moon landing of Western Pennsylvania. But made to military specifications, that means they're put together as cheaply as possible. So after one good pat, the drums burst, exposing Frank and Freddie to mysterious gases and freeze. Well, we'll get to that. When Bert shows up and helps the boys to deal with some half-living dogs and a revived cadaver. Meanwhile, outside, the punks and preps, a very weird friend group, but not all that uncommon, even in this area, find their way to the local graveyard to have a party, because as Grave 45 says, do you want a party? It's party time. That means we're blasting music, playing with road flares, and Trash is getting naked, yet again. Bert, Freddie, and Frank wrestle down the naked corpse, bashing it in the head with a pickaxe, but as it turns out, the movie lied in one of my favorite line deliveries ever. And that doesn't kill them. Get to the bone saw, gentlemen. And the bone saw is ready. Now, with a baggie of wiggling body parts, it turns out dismemberment doesn't stop them either. Bert calls in a favor with his friend Ernie, the mortician, to take care of what he first describes as a bag of rabid weasels in one of the best lines of dialogue you'll ever hear. Man, Clu Gulager could do anything. Ernie, upon seeing what's actually in the bags, has a whole lot of questions, but he's willing to throw them in the crematorium and crank it up to 11. That spreads to a gas plume, causes the main theme of the movie to start playing, and the rain changes from normal rain to acid rain, and not the chubby rain from Bowfinger. That acid rain starts to bring all of the bodies back from the dead and causes the assembled partiers to flee into Unita, where Tina had gone looking for Freddie after he didn't show up for their date. Instead, they go down to the basement, they find Tarman, who kills Suicide, yells, "More brains!" and causes the group to flee. The group try to get back to the cemetery, but they're attacked by even more zombies and separate, with 2 of them running back to Unita and the rest of them escaping to the mortuary, except for Trash, sadly. Linnea Quigley gets caught and torn apart by hungry, horny old men, but that's not the last we'll see of her, and you do see a lot of her in this movie. Frank and Freddie get sicker and sicker, so Bert calls the paramedics who diagnose the boys with a nasty case of being dead, but still conscious somehow. Then those paramedics go outside and are promptly eaten by zombies, which is one of my other favorite lines of this movie. Upon after eating the paramedics, one of the zombies gets on the radio and says, "Send more paramedics." Scuzz is also eaten by zombies. Concerned with the corpses in their own backyard, the non-dead people decide to lock the 2 dead guys into the chapel with Tina, who refuses to abandon Freddie. Meanwhile, outside, the zombie horde is growing, and they have a new leader in the person of Trash, who looks super cool and blindingly white now as she chows down on police faces and whatnot. Turns out the zombies eat brains because brains get rid of the pain of rigor mortis. In the chapel, things turn bad, and Ernie blinds Freddie with acid while they rescue Tina from her now hungry, ravenous boyfriend. With a growing zombie presence outside, Bert and Spider go to steal a cop car and try to flee, only to be forced to return to Unita after the zombie horde drives them back into the mortuary district. Ernie and Tina, left to their own devices, go hide in the attic to avoid the blind zombie of Freddie. Bert, Spider, Casey, Chuck go into the Unita basement, where after finding out that the police are no longer a going concern, Bert finally calls the number on the trioxin tank and the authorities locate their missing toxic drugs. A few phone calls and some War Games montages later, and then boom, a nuclear explosion decimates Louisville and ends the zombie horde. Or does it? The nuke burned up the zombies and caused a bunch of fires. The smoke went into the clouds. The rain washed the burning zombie remains into the groundwater. And now there are multiple reports of the water causing mild burning on the skin, just like what Trash was complaining about. We get a greatest hits montage of moments from the movie as punk rock music plays and credits roll.
It's like a Thriller revival at the end. So.
It's like a Thriller prequel at the end.
Yeah.
Because I think this came out before Thriller.
No. Thriller was 1982, my friend. So
really?
Yeah. So this is definitely borrowing cues from John Landis, and the good kind, not the Twilight Zone kind. If you know, you know. Yeah. Wow. There's a lot going on, but first things first, Ron, do you go and visit the nuclear monument in Louisville often?
Oh, it's too sad for me. It's really just too sad. But
you would have been a wee lad when that happened. So
every so often, I'll get up the courage to go and leave a pair of leather hot pants on the monument and some cans of hairspray.
Oh, the Aquanet budget in this movie.
Oh man, dude, that was the most surprising part of that movie. I even went to Brian and I said, "Do you know what happened at the end?" I said, "They just nuked it," and he goes, "Wait, what?" I said, "Yeah, it was gone."
Yeah,
he was like, "That doesn't happen." I said, "It happened in this movie. I'm telling you, you got to watch it."
That's what I'm saying. Alien versus Predator Requiem is like, we've painted ourselves in the corner. What do we do? We'll just nuke Gunnison, Colorado, because who's gonna know?
Minimal casualties.
Yep.
Yeah, like anybody knows anything about Colorado anyway. That's totally fine. So what do you think about how hard this movie leans into its initial conceit of Night of the Living Dead being a real thing by opening up with a text stamp that basically says this is a real thing that happened and all these people are real people? How do you feel about that?
I love that conceit. Yeah.
That is one of my favorite things about. There's a certain, I feel like it maybe mid 80s to mid 90s or early 80s to early 90s, somewhere in that field where that was just a trope that was used a lot. And it's one of my favorite things, especially when it's very clear that it's not a true story. But when I saw that, again, first timer watching, I was like, this is going to be good. All right, I'm in. I'm strapped in.
Yeah, that really amused me. And also, like, the medical supply warehouse, the interior of that medical supply warehouse gave me flashbacks to the one summer that I worked a warehouse job for like 2 weeks.
I like that they start right off the bat. Right after the opening, asking, do you remember that movie? Reference original. And then one of my, I know, Ron, you said one of your favorite lines or one of the best deliveries was right after this, but one of my favorites was when they pickaxe this naked zombie in the brain and it doesn't work. And the guy goes, "It worked in the movie."
The movie lied. Yeah, Tom Matthews is doing the same character that he is as Tommy Jarvis in Friday the 13th Part 6. I think it's just his character. It's what he does. But James Karen is like my second favorite thing in this movie. I'll talk about my favorite thing when it comes up. But he's my second favorite thing in this because he's so darn earnest. Like I remember him as being a lot of things, but he was always like, he was the crooked real estate guy in Poltergeist that like built all the houses on the damn graves, the coach is freaking out about at the end of that movie. But he's always playing these just earnest guys, but you can tell like this guy's like, I'm gonna show this new whippersnapper the ropes, right? And he doesn't know what the hell he's talking about, and that's what's half the fun of it, because he's just trying to get home to his TV dinner on Friday night and his can of Bud Heavy and his reruns, right? But I'm on the conceit of like Night of the Living Dead being a real thing. I feel like the generation of people that this is for would really know Night of the Living Dead because John Carpenter had that all over the first two Halloween movies. Like you could see it in all the cutscenes and stuff. And I feel like that introduced that movie back to people and it had become such a thing at this point. So when this came around, it was just playing on that. And I love that, like when you are definitely the other side of the coin or the derivative of something, owning up to that immediately automatically just sets the playing field of like, okay,
Yeah.
yes, we are part of that, but don't worry about that because it's like that's my old band, this is my new band, and we're just gonna go with it, you know. And so I got a kick out of that. I love that conceit.
Well, because of that error, Jay, of that we talked about in the opening, that meant that Night of the Living Dead was on TV constantly.
Yeah.
So like it wasn't an issue of John Carpenter having to reintroduce it. It was an issue of this was on every low-powered UHF station that could get a copy of it. And it was one of those movies, for whatever reason, Profundo Rosso is one of them. The Dario Argento movie, Deep Red.
Mhm.
It came over here and lost copyright, and it was on dubbed versions on things like everywhere. Night of the Living Dead was probably one of the first movies to get put out on VHS, just
Mhm.
because everyone jumped and like, well, I've got a beat up, 16 millimeter copy of it. Let's just go ahead and port it onto VHS and pump the market full of tapes. Like you really couldn't go anywhere without finding 15 different repackaged versions of it on VHS, DVD, so on and so forth.
It's like a special piece of capitalism to take a piece of property that's public domain and still find a way to make money off of it. By the way, which is that's just hilarious.
Yeah, and that might have been actually one of the first horror movies my brother and I ever saw because it was on TV all the time.
Yeah. I felt like that one made a lot of like TBS rounds and things like that because it's pretty safe. Like when you watch it, I mean, it's got a few moments in it, but it's a pretty safe little movie and stuff. But it was like up there with like Thing from Another World and maybe the original Invasion of the Body Snatchers and that vein of films for about 10 years. It sort of felt like a Twilight Zone episode almost, and so. But I mean, they're coming to get you, Barbara. Like that's that whole thing from that. But honestly, like the thing about this movie that I get is it's infinitely quotable, which always makes it memorable. But it's also something that makes it incredibly 80s. We were talking about it in the group chat, Lizzie. Like this movie is super 80s.
It's the most 80s movie I've ever seen. And I love it for that. I mean, I love it for a lot of reasons, but it was so quintessentially 80s. It's almost as if the movie set out to specifically touch on every important, iconic thing that existed that people now recognize as being an 80s thing.
I actually would argue that it makes a lot of those things the way it is because Ron and I've talked about this before, like on previous retrospectives, that like when you think about a decade ending, you really have to wait like 3 years into the next decade to slough off the old one. Like the 70s really ended in like 1984, and then the 80s started like 85 to 90, is sort of the
85 to like 94.
Yeah, before like Tarantino, like that's kind of a marker line, for a lot of pop culture and stuff. And this in particular like sets up so many things that a lot of horror comedies, which became a thing in the 1980s, started to delve into. Like some of my favorite things, like you've got stuff like Gremlins is a horror comedy. I know it came out before this, but then you've got like Fright Night, which is one of the biggest ones. And there's so many other ones that came out through that time where we want to mix comedy and scares at the same time because this was the target audience were teenagers. And that's also who worked at movie theaters, and they weren't getting paid enough to card anybody. So that's who we were gonna launch these things toward. And I don't know. It's a neat piece of like marketing to see these movies come together and the way that they're done because there's enough scares and enough stuff to make you go like, ooh, and get creeped about. But there's also like a lot of levity in this and a lot of fun.
I didn't realize Gremlins came out before this, but yeah, you are correct.
It's fun because, like we've talked about, there's a lot of 80s tropes that get represented. And just looking at the group of kids, I say kids, they're between the ages of 18 and 40.
38.
Yeah, but that's also a big 80s thing. Is
yes.
32-year-old high school students.
We can thank Grease in 1978 for that. So.
Yeah. But I feel like Grease is one of the reasons why we have the teenager movie that happens in the 80s.
Yeah, we do.
But it's literally like, what if Repo Man became friends with the Breakfast Club? And then we unleashed some zombies on them.
Right.
And we throw in a smear of war games in there because we got some crazy computer actions. Mm-hmm. We throw in a little bit of nuclear terror in what would probably become we get like, this is like the reverse version of Miracle Mile.
Yeah.
Where like in Miracle Mile, they know it's coming and they have to get away from it. In this movie, they're trying to get away from other things and they don't know what's coming.
Well, like nuclear terror was just like an easy go-to fear in the 1980s, like Back to the Future plays with that, and so many other movies and stuff too. War games, as you already mentioned, all those movies play with the idea of we're one red button away from annihilation, like hell, we had Battleship games where you could do that. And then RoboCop, sent that up with the Nukem game, Paul Verhoeven was having a lot of fun with that. So it's an easy fear to tap into. For folks, but the way it's played for laughs is what's funny because it's one of the many terrors in this movie, and it's sort of the last one that you think about until the guy phones in the nuke at the end.
I mean, even if you just look at like, so we're gonna jump all over the place here. After they dismember the body and they throw it in the crematorium, and it goes up into the rain clouds and starts coming down as rain. What does that immediately make you think of? Acid rain. Like yes. One of the big fears that everybody had in the 80s was like, oh, we're going to have acid rain. You better get some acid.
And I hear acid rain, and I mean because recycling and acid rain, all that shit, you guys probably like that was drilled into us hard in the early 90s. It was an all children's programming. I can't not sing the Acid Rain song from Fern Gully when I just hear the term acid rain.
I was just thinking of that. I was like, I know, like they programmed the hell out of that for us. So yes, no. Let's just say like this movie and this, I get a lot of this to Dan O'Bannon, who I know is like the alien guy, but he did a lot of stuff. He turned Running Man from the Stephen King really dark and bleak story, which I'm curious to see, Edgar Wright and Glenn Powell's version of that's coming out later in 2025. That's going to be a closer take to the book. But he turned that into that Arnold cheese fest that's so much fun to watch. Like he's good at turning things into cheese fests when you want him to, and just leaning into the humor and the fun. And to know he was basically writing this movie while in between doing lines of cocaine at the strip club, and then cast one of the strippers in this, but made her wear all the clothes. But she wore all the clothes where the actress was naked. Linnea Quigley was naked the whole friggin' time. So that's so Dan O'Bannon. That's just his sensibilities. But I think that's funny because you think of a guy like that, and these days we don't have our tours that operate necessarily like that, or you don't see their stuff. But this blew people's minds when this came out. You couldn't believe they got away with some of this stuff, And the fact that it was just this huge hit too really got people on board.
Yeah, it was wildly successful, and it did kick off a second wave of zombie movies after, the initial thing that kicked off the first wave of Italian zombie movies was Dawn of the Dead. It was such a huge hit in Europe. And then it started to kind of die down. It got replaced by the Dirty Harry knockoffs that I've talked about some before. And, stuff like that. But then this kind of kicked off a second round of we can do a zombie movie, but we can throw way more splattery stuff into it.
Well, yeah,
and it was we've got all these severed body parts left over from when we were doing cannibal movies. So let's get some use out of them.
Well, it's also the movie that dips in a lot of other horror stuff too. Because after this, you've got stuff like Chopping Mall, and the Little Shop of Horrors remake that came out, and then you've got stuff like Maximum Overdrive, which dips in Night of the Creeps, which we've talked about before, and Slaughter High. Then Toby Hooper comes back and says, "I got you one. We'll do Texas Chainsaw as a horror comedy," which Nick and I've talked about on the show. And then all of this stuff is sort of bequeathed one after the other. You get Evil Dead 2, House, and House 2 come out, Lost Boys, Monster Squad. This was the birth of tons of horror comedy. And look, whether they admit to it or not, every Silent Night, Deadly Night sequel is a friggin' horror comedy. And so they all owe themselves to this. So, and that's what I love about it. I mean, even stuff like Killer Clowns and, you know, all those things come from this and are from the sensibility that made this. And there's some other movies that came out the same year though that are in the same vein. I don't know if you guys have ever seen this early Jim Carrey movie called Once Bitten. It's a pretty 100%. Cheesy like sex comedy, like teenage sex comedy, but with a vampire in it. It's pretty good. Like I would recommend giving it a revisit. So
yeah, it's what Lauren Hutton is.
Yeah, Lauren Hutton's in it, and I mean it's another one of those like soundtrack terrific movies too. But they all kind of live in the same vein. And the thing that kicked it off, though, we talked about Gremlins and stuff. Like we need to go back. Like the very first film strip episode ever was Ghostbusters, which is like the king horror comedy of all time.
There are people out there who watch horror comedies but don't realize that they're comedies. My husband is one of them.
So these are scary movies to Brian, is what you're saying.
Well, that's not. I think he recognizes the obvious ones, right? Shaun of the Dead. I think if I had watched this one with him, he would have thought it was funny too. But the Silent Night, Deadly Night ones, he's tapping out on all those. I made him watch one, and I will never do it again.
What did the fifth one? Like you intercede like hard right into the front lens.
No, it wasn't the fifth. I like the fifth. The fifth one was the one with Geppetto, right?
Right. Yes. Was it Garbage Day?
I think it was Garbage Day. Garbage Day is the one I had. He was so mad. Like, and I was like, you didn't have to finish it. And he was like, I had to finish it. I don't get it. I was like, I think it's a cult classic thing. So, you have to be a part of, I don't know. You just have to embrace the fact that it's ridiculous. And if you don't go into it knowing that, and in his defense, I didn't warn him, that's my bad. I do that a lot to that poor man.
Isn't that part of the catch of this movie though, Ron, is that like it leans into the fact that it's goofy?
Do you know, like
it's not hiding it.
Yeah, I didn't know that. I had such a fun time watching this movie. It was a blast. Like it was just such an easy watch.
Yeah, I feel like it's a movie that definitely knows what it is. And I feel like they had an idea of what they were going to get themselves into. And I feel like especially all of the actors are like, oh, okay, we know exactly what we're doing here. So we're going to give the craziest performances we can. If I'm Suicide and I've got one beat where I'm angry all the time, I'm just going to be the angriest person that's ever been angry.
Right.
If I'm Trash, I'm just going to be draped all over him like a cheap suit. Like, if I'm Scuzz, I'm just going to be scumbagging it around in the background because I'm not really that important.
That's a great point. Like there's some really great character acting in this. Like they really embrace what it is that they're doing.
I mean, Jay, just you kicked us off by talking about the great James Karen. And what about between him and Clu Gulager? Like,
oh yeah,
give me two like more of that guys that have ever lived.
Clu Gulager is like forever the 1950s angry dad in 80s movies. Like watch that Nightmare on Elm Street 2 movie and he's a fucking 50s dad in that movie. And he's the same guy in this, and he's my favorite thing of because he's so put out by all of this the whole time, but he's always trying to come up with an answer. He's like trying to be Mr. Fix-It. I'll call my friend the mortician. I'll call the army. I'll do it. He's always just trying to like keep it alive and keep going. It's my damn business, man. I got to keep this going. So I just felt for this guy in a lot of ways.
Yeah, he's working really hard to keep this business a growing concern, even as
as the world melts around him, he's trying to make sure he can open Monday.
As cut in half dogs try to run away.
Well, we should talk about it too, because the reason we're doing this now, this is early July, like this is set around the 4th of July, which is another thing, because like most horror movies are not set in the dead middle of summer, but like that's a perfect setting for this.
Well, yeah, because all those kids are out of school. They've got nothing better to do.
These kids are out of school because they all graduated 10 years before. But
okay,
one
those
of them
kids
has a
are
summer job.
yeah, those kids are not working right now because it's too hot at the leather pants factory or whatever. You know,
Tommy Wiseau's factory is not up to code.
Tommy Wiseau's Street Fashions USA factory is now go home for the summer.
Now I want to see Tommy Wiseau's Return of the Living Dead. I kind of need to have that in my life.
Well, hi, Trash. How is your sex life?
Followed by some really bad R&B. Yeah. But
yeah,
no, but
they're established. They're supposed to be kids, 20 years somethings. They don't have anything to do all day. It doesn't get dark till late.
Well, that's an 80s trope, though, right? It's like the kids have all this free time, right? And look what kind of trouble they're going to get into. When it's actually the adults that cause all the problems in this. And going back to Clue Gulager, because when you got shipped the wrong stuff after Nom, you didn't send it back. You just held on to it for reasons. Like, that's what's hilarious about this.
Decades.
Yes.
Just kept it in the basement. Like, at some point, are you not going to clean the basement out?
But isn't that a dad trope? Like every dad has like that. It's really a man trope too. Like I might need this random piece of wire someday.
I don't know. Women do that too. Not with like wire and bits of wood, but the other things, I'm sure. And yeah,
well, we all have junk drawers, right?
Yeah, everybody's got a junk drawer.
You have stuff like that, but I mean that's what I love about it is it's built around that conceit. It's like, well, I might need it one day,
Well, having worked at working at the place I do in our big headquarters building, there is a basement level where there's like 3 offices in it, and then the rest of it is just storage. And it is literally like, here's a 50-pound box of trophies that don't have anything written on them. Here is a skid of promotional water bottles from 1994. Here is
the championship team that didn't make it.
Yeah, here is a random like 1960s brick console television. Not one of the ones that can fit on the little cart. We're talking about one of the ones that when it died, you put the TV on top of it.
Yeah,
because it was too heavy to throw away. One of those. So yeah.
I mean, but I love that though. That it's. I mean, that's a horror trope too. I mean, Night of the Creeps it plays with this. Is like the stuff in the basement will kill you if you get
street trash.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, street trash. Yeah, you guys talked about that. So yeah. I mean, but I love that though. I love the play between our 4 like main people, and then I want to talk about our kids group too. But you have Frank and Freddie, and then you have Ernie, the mortician / Nazi, the friend like that. I just got a kick out of all of those people. They were hilarious.
Ernie, the faces that he gives, his physical comedy, all of it. He was definitely my favorite. I love a good mortician because they're all a little quirky,
Yeah.
Or medical examiner of any kind. They're all, I don't know how many you guys know, but I've crossed paths with a couple. They are all like that.
I see that. That's funny. I did not know that. The fact that they call them Bert and Ernie though is not lost on me. Like that is hilarious. And they even like kind of look like it.
Yeah. And they bicker a lot like it too, which is very funny.
Yeah.
Yeah. I love Ernie. I love the subtleness with which they get across the fact that he's a Nazi.
Yes.
Or at least whether he's a reformed Nazi or just a Nazi who came over like probably through Operation Paperclip.
I was saying like the Von Braun's, like one of those. Yeah. So he's definitely that pile.
Because he's listening to Wagner. He's got that little Luger. He's got in the background. One of the things I've noticed the first time when this was on DVD is in the background he's got like a picture of what looks like Hitler.
Yes.
Like him with Hitler. Oh. It's so funny.
Yeah, I missed the Wagner too. I'm glad you brought that up. I didn't catch that when I watched it.
It's very subtle, but like you can tell,
Yeah.
like in another world, he would have a son that would want to show his father's Nazi plate off to his middle-aged neighbor that he's selling weed to, you know, like they would have that kind of relationship. So, but what's funny about those four though is that, again, everything they do, they are in a Marx Brothers movie. It just happens to have zombies in it, y'all.
Yeah.
Like the humor in this was very Marx Brothers to me.
Like right down to the physical comedy of
Yes.
when the hand falls out of the bag and grabs onto Ernie's
Yes.
pants leg, he starts freaking out and yelling, "Get it off me! Get it off me!"
Well, the half dog and like all the like,
beating of and the squeaks or the
yeah.
little
Well, can we talk about the yellow cadaver guy for a minute? Like
Sure.
that was hilarious. Like all of that was because they do everything you're supposed to do with a zombie. They brain it and it's still going. They cut it in pieces and it's still going. I just got a kick out of that. That was very Evil Dead too. I felt like they were homaging Raimi a little bit with some of that, but that was so much fun.
Yeah, definitely. That feels like I don't know how much penetration Evil Dead the original had at this point, but I feel like there's definitely something there. It's definitely playing off of each other in a way that I find really appealing. Um, and I really think that the beheading sequence works really good
Yeah.
because this is not just like a fresh corpse. This is like a guy who's ready to be like he's embalmed and ready to be like chopped up and like cut apart, right? So he's preserved, he's pickled. That's why he's yellow.
Yeah. Well, I mean that and they dropped that whole bit about like they get the perfect skeletons from India, which apparently like caused that to be a thing that people knew about after that, and they stopped doing it. So
Wow. See, I didn't know that was a real thing, but
no,
that's
like apparently that was a real thing, and it became such an outcry. Like of all the things people had an outcry from this movie, they're like, "There's body farms, and we're buying skeletons from India," and they like had to shut that business down or whatever. So yeah, that's like a real thing.
What? I thought that they made that up, Jay.
I mean, they may have, I don't know, but it's too many conspiracy pieces for me to ignore. And I'm like, no, I could totally believe we were doing that shit.
Huh.
Like that be that kind of import.
But they had perfect teeth.
Is that right? Yeah. So which leads, how did they get dead so quick? It's all the stuff you think about. But I love all that. I love the half dog. I got a kick out of that.
Yeah.
Watching it try to run after it comes back to life.
Yes. Yeah. He's just beating the hell out of it with that bat.
They sell a lot of half dogs.
And doesn't it wag its tail at one point too?
Yeah.
Yes. But all of this, and we should mention, like, because it's obvious, but all of this is like practical, goofy, cheap effects. Like, there's no money in this. Like, this movie's cheap as hell, and it looks amazing. That's what's so fun about it. It's all just like practical, pratfall stuff.
Yeah, they spent their $4 million making great puppets and making Tarman look just as goopy as possible.
Tarman was excellent.
One of the most enduring like images of any movie is that those eyes just glowing out of that slime glopola face. Now, and Tarman comes back for all the other ones, and rightfully so. And one time I saw at a horror convention somebody wearing a full body Tarman. It was amazing.
How much of that was that the Alan Trapman guy, and how much of it is like an animatronic thing that they built? Because like that was freakishly skinny and like scary.
I think a lot of it is him because there is behind the scenes footage of him like dancing in the costume.
See, because I love that they told him, like the acting note they gave him, and I wanted to throw this to you, Lindsey, just see what you think of it. They said, okay, imagine you're basically a skeleton held together by like the thinnest threads of muscle and tendon. How would you move? And that's what informed like that whole movement situation.
You know what, though? I know skinny people that can move like that very easily, like very thin people, and they've like, I don't know if you've ever seen someone do like a marionette bit.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say.
Like that.
Yeah. It looked like he was on strings. Like it's like the old Thunderbirds show or like Team America.
NSYNC music video.
There you go. NSYNC, Team America, whatever your frame of reference is.
Yeah.
And it's funny. It's funny that we talk about that because he's a Muppeteer as well.
Oh, see that?
Really?
Yeah, that checks
Cool.
out. Yeah. But no, you're right, Ron. Like the Tar Man is of anything like brains is probably the number one thing everybody remembers from this, and then he's got to be the next thing because again, it's just a continuing piece. But he becomes like the pinhead mascot of these movies, but without having the whole series lapped on his shoulders the way that the stupid Hellraiser movies did.
Oh, and apparently he played Fran Sinclair in the TV show Dinosaurs. Did you guys know this?
No.
He played a lot of characters, either by doing the puppeting of the face or performing the body or doing both.
Wow.
Which is wild.
That is crazy. Good for Alan Trotman. Is it Trotman? Trotman or Troutman? But
it's Troutman.
Yeah, man. That's amazing. Awesome.
Very good stuff.
Yeah,
but I mean,
good stuff.
That zombie in particular is like the big hero zombie of the movie. Like you just see that thing coming, you're like, what are you gonna do? You know, and when they just smash him into goo, it was like, well, yeah, that's exactly what it was. Very, again, I think Verhoeven was like, I love this movie. I do this in the RoboCop movie, you know, with the guy that gets turned into goop at the end of that.
With Emil.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like he's borrowing from that, and if whether he knew it or not, but it just feels like it reminded me of it.
I mean, he gets blasted with toxic waste, he becomes a goop monster, and then he explodes when you hit him with a car. Like that's
it's there's homage and then there's ripping off, and so, but it works nonetheless because he just obliterates, because that's what would happen if you hit that thing with a chair, you know.
A thing that's been stored in liquid for 40 years or 20 years at this point,
right?
Yeah.
Because we don't really know how old those drums are. We just know when they arrived at Unita. Yeah, and we know that at one point some of them fell off the back of a truck in Pittsburgh and caused Night of the Living Dead to happen.
Yeah, so the whole conceit is that they created this thing. It was supposed to be like a nerve gas, but no, actually, it just turns people into zombies and reanimates the dead. So, like every other good government thing, a la My Science Project, Ron, we're just going to bury it in the dirt somewhere and hope nobody finds it.
Typical Army mistake.
Right? Like I almost wanted like that scene that you get with Dwight D. Eisenhower or fake Eisenhower at the beginning of My Science Project, going like, just get rid of it. You know, like I needed that in this. Like where you had Kennedy or Nixon going, just bury those zombie crates or what, you know, whatever they had going on there. But yeah, I would have loved that. But it works nonetheless without it. But I love that that's the overriding conceit. But I got questions for y'all though about the kids for a minute, right? Because I feel like this is a riff on The Outsiders, where these would have been enemies in that movie or story, but here they're all friends and they date each other. Like the preppies and the socias and the greasers are friends in this movie.
I feel like they had at least one. It was like they had a token preppy girl, and then the rest of them were more punk leaning.
Well, it had kind of the in-between guy that had the zoot suit, but he had the hair, you know?
Yeah.
So, you know.
He was more,
you've got Chuck. Chuck and Casey could have been in any one of those John Hughes movies.
Yes, as background.
Yeah. Like they were all in the Breakfast Club randomly, got stuck in detention together one day, and now they're all best friends.
Right.
Tina's definitely 80s prep coded. Freddie is kind of in between. He's a little bit Judd Nelson-y, but not so much that he's like off-putting.
Right.
He's the linchpin friend that brings Trash, Suicide, and Spider and Scuzz together with Chuck, Casey, and Tina. He's the daywalker.
Yeah. I feel like Spider's like the token black friend, but like him and Freddie were probably like teammates or something. Like they played on like baseball together or something like that. They were buddies, you know. And Spider's just monitoring off to his other cousin that lives in Jersey at Crystal Lake, you know. But
they weren't like that far off from one of my little friend groups in high school. I feel like I was one of more of the punk-ish kids. I don't know. I wasn't as far as some of them, but we'd pick up a random prep kid every now and then, you know, that would just kind of start hanging out. I don't know. It happens. Still weird to see in a movie, but it happens.
That is very similar to like the people I hung out with in college. It was a real mixed bag of people.
Yeah.
You know, I had friends who gave themselves facial piercings with thumbtacks,
and
I had friends who were business majors who wore like ties.
Yeah.
It's a, you know, that's an interesting time in your life where you can accumulate weird collections of people to be friends and acquaintances. And I feel like a lot of that is coded like they all know themselves, they know each other from somewhere, and they've got connections that don't need to be explained because we can kind of piece it together based on how they're dressed, who like flows in between these various groups. Like I guarantee you that like Spider and Chuck bonded over their love of, I don't know, madness, because Chuck's got kind of like the pork pie hat situation going, and he could be a ska kid, so they bonded over their love of ska. Spider and Trash and Suicide and Scuzz are probably in a band together. Yeah, so it all kind of like fits.
And Suicide's just a deep thinker.
Oh, he's definitely writing when he's not you know,
he's the kid that fails all his classes, but not because he's dumb, because he says he's not challenged enough, and he's actually a genius.
Yeah, and he's writing like bad Henry Rollins style poetry.
Yeah,
exactly. Yep. Yes. Yep. Yeah. Like Trash and Suicide are like a whole like vibe.
They are a whole vibe.
I mean, he is the epitome of I've been in this for real. I'm the original punk. You guys are just posers, whatever. And she is done. I feel like Trash at one point was like the preppiest church girl at school, and then she became what she is to try to get Suicide's attention, and then she just went with it and stayed with it, you know, because it opened up something in her, you know.
Yeah, she got one reefer cigarette in her, and then it just ruined her life forever. Like
that's what happens, right?
Movie. Yeah,
you get naked on a gravestone one time, and that's it. You can't get back.
I have to say though, like it's you know, TNA in the 80s horror movies is a thing, like it's a trope, right? And all this, and Friday the 13th had well established this at this point as part of the series. Linnea Quigley's like dedication to I'll just do the whole movie naked is wild, because at some point you kind of forget about it, but then you realize like, oh, wait a minute, this chick's never got her clothes back on, like ever. She gets part of a vest on when the acid rain comes, and then that's gone when the old men chew her apart.
She was unapologetically naked. Like she was, it felt like, and I don't know if Linnea Quigley truly felt like this, but at least her portrayal was just like, she is 100% a-okay being naked. She is living her best life. Just naked with her knee highs on.
Well, that was one of her. She was one of the people you brought onto your movie when you needed somebody to get naked.
Yeah.
So that was kind of her thing.
She's in the Silent Night, Deadly Night movie that way. She's one of the, I think Friday the 13th, no, not Friday, Nightmare on Elm Street 4. She's in one of those.
Yeah, she's in 4. She's, and she's very much a body positive type of person, even like to this day, because she showed up on the last drive-in last season. And, you know, if you've never seen it, watch Linnea Quigley's horror workout tape, because it's actually a really impressive workout.
Want to watch that now.
I feel like that's a thing. Yeah.
I was like, she should be positive about that body.
Yeah.
I'd be naked too.
We can all agree on that. So we're 3 for 3 across the board.
And I like the fact that
video, take my money.
And I like the fact that it wasn't like, Trash is getting naked. It was like, Trash is getting naked again.
Yeah, it's like this had happened. That's what I'm saying. Like
this happens every time they go to the graveyard.
Right. Like, dang it, you know, and I'm like, okay, no kink shaming, but if that's your graveyard smash, sure, whatever, you know, what we're gonna call it. But
yep, and then they stole that idea for Cemetery Man later.
But no, I mean, I love though that it's a thing because it gets your attention and she does that whole dance and it's like, holy cow, is that really what I'm seeing? And then it just becomes so much like, no, that's just her outfit, which is no, she's the anti-outfit for the movie. It just
Yeah.
becomes like a joke,
It was honestly weird to see her in a t-shirt when they put her in one for that one scene.
Yeah,
It was
yeah.
way more awkward to see her in a t-shirt than it was to see her in the buff because she just felt so natural naked,
I
which is
know.
what a weird thing to say. But yeah, it was
Yeah.
just like that's how she was meant to be. She was meant to be unclothed this entire movie.
Hmm. I mean, that gives us Ron's mentioned that was sort of her hallmark in horror, and
Yeah.
she doesn't like shy away from that at all. So she's
Yeah.
just like, no, this is
It
just
was
it.
awesome. Good for her.
Yeah, no.
Good
But the fact that they had her do that and then they like people were freaking out at back at the studios like you can't show a woman like naked completely and then they like made her like wear a merkin or something like you sure can't do that and they made her do like the Ken doll thing and it's so weird, like to hear the stories about that. I'm like of all the things for the studio to freak out about in this movie where people are getting their heads ripped off and all this stuff, but God forbid we have naked people in America, so it's
Yeah, but we can behead all of the zombies that we want.
right. Yeah.
Yeah.
We turn people into complete goo. And then
And let's
All
talk
the
about how the fact that she's not wearing anything makes it really hard for them to hide the special effects sequences where she's getting like attacked and
right.
bitten, and they
Yeah.
still find a way to make it look really good.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's why I said like I felt like it was a thriller revival when the acid rain hits and all the zombies come up out of the ground and stuff. I mean, I got thriller vibes out of all that because that y'all like that is burned on my brain the first time I saw that music video and then the making of that they put out of that may have been one of the first making of things I ever saw. And just seeing how they pulled that off and stuff. I mean, just it felt like, yeah, we're just going to do that right now, and it works perfectly in this movie. They just couldn't afford to get the song. Like there was no way they could license that out because Michael was at the height of his powers at this point.
Yeah, and I feel like the vibes would be wrong to put to put Thriller in here.
Yeah, I don't think that would have
Yeah.
fit. Yeah.
I am unapologetically a huge fan of this soundtrack.
It was a great
just in general.
soundtrack.
And I know Jay wanted to talk about the soundtrack a little bit, but are you ready to get to that point?
Oh yeah, I love the soundtrack, all of it, and I'll tell you the song that's now on. I'm going to run a race in July with "Party Time" from 45 Grave on that list. And now,
Nice.
what's wild is you listen to the lyrics of that, and it is some messed up shit, no doubt. But the chorus is just a banger the whole way. Like it's time to party, it's just 80s, unapologetically 80s rock, like rat
Yeah.
kind of hit, but it's got a punk vibe to it too, which makes it fun. And I think that's why it works. But I'm with you, Rob, man. Everything on this soundtrack just kills completely.
Yeah, I mean, like the Cramps, when you open up with a Cramp song,
Mm-hmm.
fabulous. Even like the more esoteric stuff like SSQ, that Tonight We'll Make Love Till We Die, that Trash dances to, Top of the
Yeah.
Tombstones, is great. There's a great Rocky Erickson song in there. He's one of those like outsider Daniel Johnson types who somehow got in this movie. TSOL, California Punk Rock Legends, like they're up there with like Black Flag for me.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, some fabulous music up and down. And while we're on the point, I forgot it's not Wagner, it was Norbert Schultz,
Oh,
who was who was a composer he was the like Goebbels's pet composer. And
Oh.
the song that Ernie's listening to is called Panzer Roland in Afrika Vor.
Oof.
So it's literally like
That's
Nazi
like
war hymn.
real.
war anthem. Yeah, yeah.
Ooh, all right.
Okay. Yeah, they're not coding and hiding that at all anymore.
No, like now that you can look up the soundtrack online, everybody knows. But yeah.
Well, but that's what's cool is that you've got a little bit of that, and the natural score to this is just the standard orchestral kind of horror stuff. But what's wild is that the themes of it and the notes of it like echo in a lot of other movies, throughout this decade and things. And then to mix it was a thing at the time to like mix in music people could buy, or would listen to as part of your movie soundtrack. But I try to think of horror movies that I felt like had like killer rock soundtracks or punk soundtracks to go with them, and I couldn't think of a better one, honestly, y'all. Like this one's pretty darn good.
For at least for this genre of music, yeah, it's hard to beat this. But I really, and it's not necessarily a horror movie, but Judgment Night, that soundtrack is phenomenal.
Yeah, yeah.
Everybody loves that one if you like new metal at all, because it's basically like the prototype for new metal is like Fred Durst heard the Judgment Night soundtrack. He's like, oh, okay, I can do this.
Yeah. I can do this actually rather easily. So,
but like for one that uses like commercial music, no. I mean, there's some really good like orchestral soundtracks, and I love like Goblin, all the stuff Goblin did for like Dario Argento. But like none of that's like, well, let's go through this record collection Tarantino style and pick out some,
yeah, Goblin's like the heavier Tangerine Dream, if you want to have a group do your soundtrack.
But I will say, having seen Claudio Simonetti and his band play the Suspiria soundtrack live while Suspiria is playing is amazing.
Oh man,
because they played it live to the music, like the sound would drop out from the movie and they would just play the score live, and then like we'd be watching the movie, and then after the movie's over, it's like, well, we've got all these other great songs from all these other like Demons, Contagion, all these other great 70s and 80s Argento movies. So they watched the movie with us, basically played along the soundtrack, and then they just played like an hour and a half of like incredible like movie soundtrack prog rock amazingness.
Well, I would love to see like just if you could ever pull it together, like some band or a couple of bands like play this soundtrack like live for like a revival of the movie or something, like one of the anniversaries, something like that. That would be pretty badass. Like to get some of the pop punk bands now to do this. Like I mean you got to find one that doesn't have anything better to do. But like the Bowling for Soup guys would play the shit out of this. Like they would play all these songs.
Oh, 100%. I feel like there's a lot of bands who would love to get a crack at this, because I mean, like, if you think about any horror punk band, the Cramps and the Damned and 45 Grave are all like, well, this is your groundwork,
right?
And
well, you say they're doing a new movie. I hope to goodness they've got some good bands on there from the current ilk playing on the soundtrack when it comes out. I hope they don't try to get away from that and do a serious take on this, because we don't need that. Like this is not that kind of movie.
No,
that's a great point, and I don't know who you could get to. I mean, I can think of bands who would be great. Like if you just go to AFI and be like, "Hey, we're doing another." That's
so funny that I was just thinking of that band earlier today, like randomly.
It's like, we're doing Return of the Living Dead. You guys want to do the soundtrack? Davey Havoc would like shove his way to the front of the line immediately.
Yeah.
Hell, we're out thinking this. Y'all just go grab everybody that's doing the Warped Tour in 2025 and go, everybody gets a song. Like every one of those bands would do a song.
Guys, quick project.
Yeah, like they could record that in an afternoon.
It'll only take a second. You're all here. Let's just
exactly. They would all do it. It would be great. It would sound awesome. So I would go for that. Yeah.
The first time I saw AFI was on the Warped Tour.
Oh, see, very cool. So, there's one that's not on the Warped Tour that I'm going to tell you, if somebody would remake Party Time, give that to the Pretty Reckless with Taylor Momsen's like killer vocals. She would eat that song alive.
She can do that one, and she can do that one, and she can also do the Tonight cover.
Yes, yeah.
She's got some serious pipes.
Yeah, now I want to hear her do the two big Jim Steinman songs off Streets of Fire. Just now that we're talking about this, Ron, like I need that to happen. So.
Oh man, that's a good time right there.
Yeah, Hellstorm too would be good.
Mm-hmm. Yes, Hellstorm would be awesome. Yes, I agree. Lizzie could tear these apart. So this is
100%.
Yeah.
Well, speaking of getting torn apart, how do you feel about the efficiency with which we introduce Zombie Chow in this? Like the paramedics show up. Number one, that's an actual like 80s Louisville ambulance, because I've seen them. Number two, all of the cop cars and the cop uniforms are dead nuts accurate. I don't know.
They sourced that locally? That's wild.
I don't know if Dan O'Bannon had like been here or something, but
because they shot this in LA. That's what's wild.
Yeah, they shot it in LA, but like there are places in town I could go that look like that right now.
That's hilarious.
And the uniforms and the specifically the badging on the sleeves is like the exact one that they still use today.
They must have like you said, come and done like a few days of scouting, and we're like, no, we're going to this part of Burbank, and we're getting these uniforms. Who did the production design on this? Bravo.
Which also means there hasn't been an update in 40 years.
Well, not to that sleeve patch. No, the uniforms are now all black and try to look, impressive and spooky and less silly. But the patch itself is still there.
That's wild.
Yeah, we get a couple of interesting zombie pieces. One of which is clearly a performer who has no legs. Who's a zombie that we see attacking the police officers? Who gets is that the one that attacks the cops, gets shot, and then just hops back up and takes off?
Runs away. Yeah.
Keeps going. Yeah.
And then we've also got the great zombie puppet that Ernie has his conversation with.
Yes. That was deep and dark. And I love that these weird, these super zombified zombies actually talk a little bit in this. But that was a big mind fuck. Can you imagine being dead and you think, I'm dead, nothing matters. Like, I can't feel anything, I'm gone, everything's done. But you could still feel yourself rotting.
Yeah. And like the idea of eating brains relieves the pain. Like, but that's also like a mind fuck that like you think when you're dead, like, oh, all pain goes away.
Yeah.
No, it don't. My back
turns
still
out
hurts.
It doesn't.
Well, to be fair, we don't know how they were feeling before they got revived.
True.
But as we see them claw their way out of that puppet, the skeleton puppet that pops up out of the grave is the first one we see, and its heads back in it and opens its eyes. They love that puppet because it comes back in the credits as part of the greatest hits.
Yes.
And it just makes you wonder like how much meat is necessary to make the corpse ambulatory, because there wasn't much left on that skeleton except for sinews and stuff.
Just enough to keep it like moving, I guess, is the whole point. So yeah, but that's what I like about it though, is that they're in various stages of decomposition, and they just but it doesn't really affect their power or anything like that, because they're all after one thing, there's but you can't kill them the way that you think you can kill them. You basically have to completely destroy them. And then that's still not enough. You got to throw them in the furnace. And that's not even enough.
And even then, it rains acid rain and makes more things come back. So now we've got this crazy feedback loop of zombifying everything. And we still don't know how to obliterate all of this.
Well, and the fact that Frank and Freddy get infected with the gas, so they're slowly turning into zombies, like, and that they're aware enough to know that, and obviously Freddy becomes one at the end, and Frank is sentient enough to apologize to his wife, hang his ring up, and throw himself in the furnace. Man,
that was so sweet. Their zombie arc was really fun. The paramedics taking their vitals.
Yeah, and that ties back to the Marx Brothers-iness of those four guys together, because those two were doing some insane choices.
Yes,
and man, they're doing some crazy stuff. And I love the fact that Frank is the one who's like, "Well, I'm not going to hurt anybody. I'm just going to go check out, and then I'm going to pray and say, sorry, God, I don't have a choice because I think I'm already dead. So this isn't suicide. It's just."
I don't want to become a brain eater,
It's just like opts for self-cremation, which I guess is okay.
Yeah.
In the eyes of God, because he's already dead.
I was going to say, what do you call it if you're already dead?
Right. You can't. Well, what's funny though is that behind the scenes, like all of these people, particularly Clu Gulager, all took a swing at Dan O'Bannon at some time or another. Like they all got into a fight with him. because he was so belligerent and so hard to work with. And Gulager in particular was like, I'm tired of you talking to these kids like this. And I would go after him in between takes.
Oh my God.
Which if you've ever seen like Dan O'Bannon, he was not a large man. He was this small, kind of almost frail looking little dude, but apparently he was mean as hell. Was just really hard to deal with. And Clu Gulager's kind of a bigger guy, so he's big dad, but he was set dad apparently to everybody, while James Cameron was over there just laughing at everyone. But that's what I find hilarious is that out of all of that, they talk about all the time, like adversity creates some of the best art, right? And this movie's no different from that. Like even in spite of all that, they still got great performances out of each other because I think he just let them kind of go and do what they wanted to do.
And I would call this great art.
When you look back at Dan O'Brannon's history, it's not a surprise that he's a curmudgeon because he was at USC with John Carpenter and collaborated with him on Dark Star.
Yes,
and was an early Carpenter guy. And can you think of someone more curmudgeonly than John Carpenter?
No, it's hard to think of it.
Clearly, that rubbed off on Dan O'Bannon.
Well, did you say he worked on UFC?
No, he was at USC with.
Carpenter. At USC. Okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they were in school together and worked on the movie together. If you've ever seen like the really long, like expansive Alien documentary, like Making of that they made that Ridley produces, he's in a lot of it. And when you hear him talk, you're like, he's like a sort of impish John Carpenter because he just hates everything. But he'll just tell it to you. So he'll tell you the story. I mean, you'll cash the checks and go to the strip club, as it were. But
I mean, I'm pretty sure a lot of his curmudgeonliness stems from his Crohn's disease. And because that's what inspired the chest burster scene from Alien.
Yeah, I did know that.
Putting Crohn's disease on screen, which, has to be terrible.
Wow. I, as a child, thought that's what giving birth was because I watched that movie way too young. And I thought that's just how it happened. Turns out it wasn't really that far off.
I mean, just go down a few, but yeah. So it can be.
Fun fact, he's the bum that you see pushing the cart through downtown.
Yep.
In the movie.
Mm-hmm. He wanted to have his own cameo. Yeah.
Yeah, he's got his Hitchcock moment in there.
Yeah, exactly. Nice. He's in there. So he's responsible for the chest burster and a lot of the like interplay between the group and on Alien, and Ronald Shusett is responsible for the face hugger and the idea of the oral like violation of a man being the scariest thing you could possibly put on screen in the 1970s. I mean they dreamt that up like sitting in their living room just sort of going like, what's the freakiest, scariest, weirdest thing we could think of? And that's what Ronald Shusett added to the
yeah, and Ronnie Schuset's like, hey, have you ever seen Deliverance? What about that but a scorpion?
yeah, that with a scorpion and no Ned Beatty. So yeah.
But yeah, what do you think about I really like how gradual the transformation is for Frank and Freddie.
Yeah.
Compared to how abrupt the transition is for Trash. Like she's dragged down, she dies, presumably, but the next time we see her, she is like, looks like she's carved out of white marble. She's got crazy like fire looking hair, and I don't know if they did something to juice her mouth to make it look like it opened wider than it was, or if she's just got a really wide open mouth, because it looks like she unhinged her jaw to bite the cop when Trash reappears. That's kind of a surprise.
She is literally like the epitome of the white zombie come back. That's she's on the cover, like her skeletal or whatever is like the model for the cover or whatever. It's a striking look. And we're talking about, again, a woman that's been naked the whole movie. And this is the most striking thing is when she comes back as a zombie, and not the fact that she still doesn't have any clothes on. It's how they make her look, and it's all makeup.
Yeah. I like that they differentiated between the catalyst that turns you into a zombie and how long that takes. Like it's a little bit different depending on what it is that turned you.
Yeah. The trioxin gas takes a long time.
Yeah.
You know, maybe you're dead immediately, but it takes you a long time to turn into a zombie. But if you get bitten by one of these things, it's like vampire instant,
Well,
you know,
no,
or
because
almost instant.
it's not related to the bite. It's related to the acid rain, I think.
Is that it? Okay.
That's what I think they're implying because you see, Suicide doesn't get back up after he's bitten.
See, I kind of the reason maybe I'm conflating this with Night of the Living Dead again, though, because Johnny with Barbara in the opening scene of that comes back later as a zombie because he gets bitten in the graveyard in front of her, and maybe I'm conflating those two
So
things.
you have to be dead and also be exposed to the chemical. But if you're already dead when you're exposed to the chemical, like Trash was, then it's a little faster versus this is, and Ron, Jay, correct me if I'm wrong here. This is my take on it. So since she was dead because she got eaten by the old guys first, and then was also exposed very shortly after to the acid rain, she turned pretty quick.
Well, she had already been exposed to the acid rain before she was attacked.
Mm-hmm. So it was like sandwich.
She's talking about how
she
much
had
she
like
was
a perfect
burning and
little
stuff.
acid sandwich.
Right.
Yeah.
And the same thing with Freddie and
Yeah.
Frank. They were both talking about how much it burned when they got the trioxin on them.
Yeah.
So I feel like they kept their consciousness and turned while still alive because they had a direct exposure.
Mm-hmm.
And Trash got secondary exposure through the rain, which is what was also reanimating the corpses. So I'm not sure why Suicide didn't come back, or if that was just a thing that we weren't supposed to think about because it's the 80s.
Yeah, I wonder if it's one of those that's just they didn't bring him back because they had
maybe
enough
he did
going
come
on.
back and we just didn't see him. He may have been in the movie.
Yeah, that's
maybe
true. And also,
he might have been coming in when they dropped the nuke. Yeah.
Yeah.
And also, we see that he's missing a lot of his brains because Tarman had a good feast there. So maybe there's something to
Right.
Maybe he was missing whatever was necessary in his brain left for like locomotion. He's just kind of like laying there aware but unable to do anything about it because he's missing that part of his brain.
Point.
Oh god, so he's Metallica 1 is basically what you're saying.
Yep. So, but he can't do the Morse code by banging his head.
Right. So well, I could see that. But I when Trash comes back and starts taking out the cops, the movie hits overdrive for me because I was like, oh no, it's a pretty great set piece when she's just mowing through them.
Yeah. And I love that we follow that up with Spider and Bert getting in the car trying to flee and then having to turn back around and come back because they face a literal horde of the living dead.
Right.
That's like we see the cops get overrun and we think, oh, that's bad. But then somehow it has gotten worse since then. And I guess all the cops have turned around and joined the zombie horde too. And now there's
maniac
like hundreds
cops
of people. Yeah.
Yeah. They're all coming back now.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it is like an army of the dead are launching into the town. You know, it's overrun. Well, again, and I've referenced it before, but it's the end of that AVPR movie where all that shit is going down in the middle of town. There's nothing anybody can do. You got a Predator alien and a Predator locked in Mortal Kombat. The only thing left to do is to drop a nuke on everybody, except Stephen Pasquale.
And that's apparently what the government's contingency plan was, because as we see, as things go from bad to worse, we get Ernie upstairs with Tina, and the Freddy zombie is the Freddy zombie is like is an interesting take on it to me because he's so like emotionally manipulative.
Yes, he's gaslighting his girlfriend.
Yeah, it's like, was he like this as a person, or did this just bring out like the worst of him, where it brought out the best in Frank?
Yeah, no, I think you're right. I think it did lead into his worst tendencies.
Yeah, but that's really. I hurt myself trying to get to you, Tina. My hand's completely off now.
Look what you made me do. Yeah, it's very much that. So, but yeah, I love when they're calling in the army, and the general is like taking these notes, like he's taking just basic information like, okay, so what's happening? How many people? Okay, sure, no problem. And then he just hangs up and he calls that, poor, corporal or whatever, like, okay, here's the
Who's
code.
so excited to help?
Yes.
They've done this before.
Right. Like they've gone through the drill because he gets the code breakout. That's a war games thing. And like he's authenticating. He's like, okay. He's punching it in and, they're going to launch it out, which makes me wonder, like, if back in the 60s or early 70s, whenever he had gotten these crates shipped to him, if he had called them, would they have come and picked them up before they were opened? Or were they going to nuke it no matter what? What was the steps to the contingency plan?
Well, in the other movies, you see that the army would have come and picked them up and taken them away. But once they're open, I feel like you've got no other options.
Yeah, containment is broken at that point, right? So
yeah, it's like a life force type of deal.
Or it's like what Donald Sutherland wants to do in Outbreak and nuke San Francisco or whatever.
100%.
Yeah. So yeah, it's exactly that. So, or what all the people in Dreamcatcher want to do, just blow that piece of Maine to hell too.
But with a lot less farting than in Dreamcatcher.
yes, a lot less of that.
He even asks too, and why didn't you call? And then he goes, "Oh yeah, no, totally understand. Probably would have done the same thing."
Exactly. Yeah. But it's wild. I love the freeze frame. We break onto that, and old Bert's like, "Yeah, I've done the right thing here." Right? As, everything literally turns to dust.
Yeah.
Yep. And as we see that it didn't solve the problem, which is why I'm kind of pumped for the thought of like this 18 months later
legacy sequel situation.
Yeah.
I'm really interested in that.
Instead of 28 weeks later, it's like 18 weeks later.
18 weeks and 40 years later, here we are.
But yeah, I think we have gotten to just about everything we'd want to discuss in this particular movie. And that kind of gets us to our final thoughts, popcorn ratings, and recommendations. Jay, what are yours for Return of the Living Dead?
I'm so glad we finally got around to this one, and it was so much fun to revisit because it had been years since I saw this, and I just forgot how much fun this movie is. And that's the thing that I'll just put a button on here, is that this movie's just fun. And sometimes I like a good scare as much as anybody. And it's hard to actually get one these days because I feel like I've just seen all of it if it's not some cheap jump scare, But it's fun to see a horror comedy that works, because usually they lean too hard into the comedy side of it and it becomes like Sharknado 5 or some nonsense, or Silent Night, Deadly Night 5, or something like that. Or they lean too hard into the horror part and it's just this gory kind of mess. See all the Hostel type movies or whatever. This is the movie that balances all that together. It's got this killer soundtrack. Everybody in this movie clearly knows what they're there to do, and they give these really big and fun performances. So there's something for everybody here. And I would strong recommend anybody, if you haven't seen it or if it's been a long time, definitely go back and revisit. And as far as popcorns, I mean, it's a big old large popcorn with all the butter and salt and fixings you want, and a big like 42-ounce cherry Coke to go along with.
Very nice. Lindsay, what do you think?
42-ounce cherry Coke. I like it. I thought this movie, I'm going to echo Jay. I thought it was really well balanced with the horror and the comedy. Right out of the gate, I had a blast watching it. It was so fun. The acting, the character work was so fun. The Marx Brothers moments, fantastic. Soundtrack, 10 out of 10 stars. And we didn't really talk about the runtime, and I don't think we needed to, but I am just I love a really well-timed movie where it doesn't feel like it was too long or too short. And I feel like for a horror movie specifically, like 73 to 92 minutes really is the sweet spot, and this is at the upper range. But but I thought it was just the perfect amount of time to pack all of that in. It probably could have run a little bit longer, actually. I don't know if I would have complained, but it was perfect as is. So I'm gonna give it a large, really good popcorn too. I'll tell you what I'm gonna do though with the salty sweet combo. I think we need for the tar man a little bit of chocolate sauce drizzled on top of that popcorn. Who doesn't like a little bit of chocolate popcorn? I'm a fan. So that's a good thing. That's not, but I would absolutely recommend it. This will definitely get added to my normal viewing schedule for sure. But yeah, really fun. Highly recommend. Go out and watch it if you haven't yet.
And there's not really much I can add. I'm going to be extra large popcorn because this is one of my favorite movies. To me, it is probably the best horror comedy to execute both the horror elements and the comedy elements without it being out of balance. So yeah, I like the salty sweet combination that we've got going for us and I really love the addition of the goo, Lindsey, because that's great. Great choice. But yeah, like, you've got great character actors doing their thing. You've got a director that pushed them clearly in the right ways to get a good performance, even if it made him unlikable. And he didn't really direct much after this for obvious reasons. But man, there's a reason this movie is like kicked off a franchise. There's a reason like it's still around. There's a reason like I rushed out and bought the DVD in 2002, and then when they restored the music rights to it, I bought it again, right? Extra large popcorn. I'm glad to check this off of the list because this is one of the ones that I've been itching to do since I first started showing up on Filmstrip, like however many years ago it was, 10 or 12 or whatever, million years ago, in a completely different world. But yeah, 100% extra large popcorn. Check it out if you haven't. If you have seen it before and haven't watched it in a while, watch it again. Fire this bad boy up for, next year for the 4th of July, make it an annual tradition like I like to do.
I was going to say, I usually like Jaws is like a 4th of July movie, like staple for me, but I think this one's now making the rotation as well. Like this is going to be a 4th of July
new
movie.
favorite.
Yeah, pop this on for 3rd of July and, you can still have Jaws on the 4th, but check it all off. Yeah. I watch it every year on the 3rd or the 4th, depending on what day I actually have off from work, because I'll fire it up then with some, probably some burnt hot dogs or something to fit the milieu. But speaking of burnt hot dogs, I think we're just about done here. You can find and follow us on social media at Filmstrip Pod, where we share announcements about upcoming shows as well as other fun content. And don't forget to subscribe and share the show. Bonus points if you leave us a positive review, as it helps other people find our podcast, and it makes us feel really good about ourselves. Until next time, thanks for listening to Filmstrip.
Thank you for listening to Filmstrip. You can find more episodes on our website, filmstrippodcast.com. The Filmstrip theme music is produced and performed by Frozen Lake 121. All content used or discussed in these podcast episodes is the property of the respective owners and used under the Fair Use Act, Section 504, C2, Title 17.